If you saw the picture in the newsletter of what I'm going to do, it's a little square wing bowl. And I got one started here today. Unfinished. I got the wings done on it, okay? And I think that's the one I'll probably finish up with tonight. But it's a flat thing here with the bowl in the middle. And it's got the same principles as a lot of different kinds of square-edged pieces, whether it's a perfect square or a rectangle or whatever. But it's obviously you got to do some turning on both sides. So I'm going to go ahead and get started here, I guess. And I think I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it with this one. I brought two possibilities here. Let's go with this one. Okay. I'm going to put the spur drive on it. And one of the things I like to do on these is I like to, I don't know if you can see that or not, but I found a log that's got the pith near one edge. And I like to turn these where the pith isn't even in there anymore, and that way it's less likely to crack as it dries. So I found this came from a neighbor's yard, and the pith was way over here to the side. So I thought, well, that's going to be the top. So the bowl will be right in this area here, and then the wing right through here, which is pretty much a fairly wide area. And then my tenon for the bottom will be on this side here. So I'm going to put the spur drive in this end and put me a tenon back over here. And what I've started doing on these, because you'd kind of like to have your starting point with your spur drive and then where your tenon is going to be, they need to be opposite each other, centered up on the log, centered in this dimension and centered from here to here. And you can make little adjustments as you go along if you have to, if you do it quick enough. So I'm going to go ahead and get this started. And I don't know, it's probably not a good idea to hammer these in, but that's the way I do it. And I always take a Forstner bit or a chainsaw or something and flatten, get down through the bark, because you're not going to hammer this into some bark and get it to stay there. So that ought to be good enough. Okay. Get used to this lathe. It's not exactly my Powermatic. Get some chips flying here in a minute. Get that good and tight since nobody out there is wearing a catcher's mitt. Let's see if this is... I think... I'm going to see if my tool rest will fit in there. Yeah, I like it better. Of course, one of the first things you do, I got to get this over here. Well, that'll lock on either side, won't it? Okay. That's good. Yes, nice green wood, yeah. It could be down several months and still be green enough to do this. In fact, there's a piece I practiced on. I'll show you later that's been down for 6 months or a year, and it's still fairly wet on the inside. One of the tests on any of these, anytime you throw a log on here in this direction here, you can kind of check it to see if you're cattywampus one way or the other. So you can come back here and check to see. So that looks pretty good. So I think that's going to work okay. And of course you want to get this up here so that you're not banging into it with the wood as it comes around. I think that's going to work there. So that's the speed control. And I'm going to follow the rules, I guess, and wear this crazy thing. I don't know what that's going to do to my audio. Maybe it'll make it better. Is it capturing it a little bit better in there? Okay. I can even hear it better now. I'm in a barrel. Right?
Sound like Darth Vader.
Darth Vader, yeah. I could put this closer to my nose and you could hear me breathing. Then it would. That's one thing I've learned is don't put the mic too close to keep it down below their mouth a little bit. Okay. Got my favorite 3/8 gouge, whatever size that is. I do everything with that guy. I'm going to put a tenon up here, but one of the main things I want to do is dig down outside the tenon and see where my margins are on both sides of the bowl, because I want to get those fairly even. Let's see. Thought I had another piece with me. I guess I don't. When I'm making these cuts, I like to kind of get around here and come at it from the back side, kind of sneak up on it from behind. So I get in here like this. I don't know if you can see that okay. So before I get too far, I want to go ahead and dig down in here till I get out near the edge of that thing. I'm going to have a 2-inch tenon, so I like to leave about 3 inches out here at least to have some wiggle room in case I need to make a slight adjustment. So it's just a trial and error kind of thing. Oh, not even getting close to it. It's coming off pretty evenly here, so that's a good sign. What I'm looking at right here is the amount of bark left there and roughly the amount there. Because when we get out to where the wings are, I want to have that margin between the flat part and the bowl rim about equal. It doesn't have to be, but it just looks a little better. And that's looking pretty close. I got to get, and this is obviously not a symmetrical log. If the log was perfectly round, it'd be pretty easy to do. But when you got one that's kind of lopsided, it's a little bit harder. Go a little deeper here. That doesn't look too bad. The amount of space I got here and the amount of space I got here is roughly the same. If it's not, you move the point away from the short side. So if this side here is a little skinnier than over here, I would loosen this up and I would just rotate it to move the point here away from this side half the distance of the difference. So if there's a ½ inch, one's ½ inch wider than the other, you'd move it 1/4 of an inch away from the skinny side. That's kind of how I remember it. I'm going to go with that like it is just for the fun of it. So now the next thing I want to take the bottom side of the wing and I want to hog off all this wood out here and get me a nice flat bottom side of the wing. And I'll usually go in and say, I want to draw some lines on here. I'm going to want the wing to be right about here in the wider part. So somewhere in that vicinity there. Is that showing up okay? The pith is right up here. So if this represents the wing thickness right in here, say, and the bolt is going to come up right here somewhere, and it'll come down there like that, then this is the area here that I want to leave as the wing. Does that make sense? And then the pith will go away when I hollow out the bowl. So I'm wanting to come to about this area here for the bottom of that flat wing. I've never done it this scientifically before. I just start hogging away wood, and then so maybe I ought to draw some lines here. It might help. Okay, so let's see if I can get rid of some wood there. I'll show you two different ways to do that. Probably go a lot faster. A little bit off balance. Now I can keep coming at this the way I've been coming at it, and you can kind of brace your tool against that handle there sometimes to give you a little more stability. And it's almost, I'm just using the lower side of the tip. I don't know if you can see that or not. And this cuts like hot butter. Now, coming out this way, it will more than likely tend to chip away some of the bark. If you got thick bark on here and you're trying to save it, it chipped off a little bit right there. It didn't chip any right here. You could also come in from this direction. Now that I've taken some wood off here, I can also bring my tool rest in a little bit closer. Make sure it's not hitting. And I can very carefully, and notice I'm not getting any appendages hanging over the top of that tool rest. Any square turning, keep everything back this side. And I noticed yesterday when I was practicing, when I was shear scraping, I was getting a lot of, or I was hogging, I was getting a lot of nice shavings coming off, and it was piling up there. And I really couldn't see where my finger was. And I got to think, you know, I might ought to clear that out a little more often so I don't accidentally get that finger, because you can hurt yourself really bad if you get something on the other side of there. But you can come in kind of like this. I'll see if I can make it work. This is how Stuart Batty does it, I think, if I remember right. Comes in like this. Now let's see if that was any cleaner up here. No bark ripped off there, no bark ripped off there. So that works better as you get down near the end. Now another way, how many people have an easy rougher? You people have the easy rougher. It's this guy here that's got the flat carbide cutter on it. And it can hog away a lot of wood pretty quick too. So let's see, do a little comparison shopping here. And I usually like to have it angled, I hadn't watched their video in a long time, angled down just a little bit. I don't want it jabbing up into the wood. I want the handle aiming down into the wood a little bit. Too aggressive. That feels like that chipped away some bark there. I won't be surprised if it did. Yeah, see that big chunk that came out right there? Because it's coming in like that, and then it breaks it off. It's not going to break it on this side because it's coming into the cutter. And here the cutter's pulling it away. So I wouldn't want to go all the way down to my final shot using the easy rougher, but you can save a lot of time with that thing. If you're really crazy, you go over to the bandsaw and save some time with it too. But I don't recommend doing that with the bandsaw unless you've got a sled of some kind that can keep that piece of wood in the same plane. Because that, you know, that bandsaw blade can rip that out of your hand pretty quick. If you've built you a sled to run that through, you could go whack and then whack and do in about 15 seconds what it's going to take me 10 minutes to do. So that's how I'm going to go ahead and work on this with this guy. So let me get the thing a little bit closer. Okay, let's get some wood off of here now. Getting there. I'm going to check that black line every once in a while. I'm sneaking up on it there pretty good. Getting pretty close now. I think that's a little bit off center. Doesn't look like I have as much room over here as I do over here. So I probably need to take some more off on that side. I'm going to see if I can get away with making that little adjustment right here just for the fun of it. I'm going to move it away from the thin side just a little bit. Now that makes this no longer round and concentric with a lathe, right? So I'll have to make some adjustments there. But I think I got enough wood left. It's not going to be a problem. See if that looks a little more centered. I'm going to go up here and round everything out again up here. I got a lot more wood up here than I really need, I think. Trying to get it back in the same plane again. Now notice I'm not moving my hands or my arms at all. This is strictly just leaning back with my body. I don't want to be, I'm not trying to play any games with wrists or anything like that. Just rock back a little bit on it. And I'm trying to get a vertical, fairly vertical line here. Doesn't look too bad. I think I got a better margin over here on this side now compared to that side. Looks a little bit better. So I think that worked out okay. Now I'm going to make my bowl. I'm going to make the bowl. Let me see if I can get my marker back over here. I got to look at about how much I want to take off here. So here's going to be the edge of the wing here. So I want to get rid of a lot of this wood here. So I've got at least a ½ inch or so of wing sticking out on each side of the bowl. So I want to get rid of probably down about that line right there. Let's see if I can do that. And then I'll clean up this transition between flat and round here in a second, hopefully. Okay. A little bit more. So the next thing I want to do is go ahead and finish playing with this flat part out here and just shear scraping it enough. I may be bumping out here on the edge of this thing. Slightly shear scrape that. Okay, I got some margin on both sides. It's not even, but it's good enough for tonight, I think. So now I'm going to just kind of put a rough bottom of the bowl shape on it, just kind of try to round it off. And let me check my, I like my fancy homemade tenon sizer here for small jaws or big jaws. That was made many, many years ago when I couldn't afford to go buy something like that made out of plexiglass. So I got enough here to put a tenon right down in this area here. I could actually have it that far out if I wanted it out there. So let me scoot this in a little bit closer here. Something rattling. Is that what it was? Okay. I gotta go a little deeper because I gotta have enough room for a shoulder there, and I don't have a very wide shoulder at that point. So let me go a little deeper here. A little bit more. Okay. Go ahead and make that tenon. Want that shoulder to 90 degrees to the tenon. And mine isn't really a dovetail, so I got a little too much dovetail in there. I think that might work. Take just a little bit more off of there. That looks pretty good. It's going to be a shallow bowl, a little more shallow than I probably started out to be. So if I'm going to leave a mark there as to where I might part it off, at the end it might be getting parted off right about there somewhere. So ideally I'd come in and round the bottom of this. Unless I want a square bottom bowl, I need to start rounding that in a little bit. Something like that. You get the idea, just whatever shape you want on the bottom. Now, I'm not the greatest at parting stuff off. I like to reverse chuck it and bring the tailstock back up and work on the bottom of the bowl at the very end. And that gives me a little more leeway here. I can actually have part of that tenon be the very bottom of the bowl if I want to. Whereas if you part it off, you're going to lose that much wood. And I've never been any good with a parting tool to start with. So let's see. Now I'd come back, if I was trying to make this to be a finished piece, I'd come back and shear scrape this very gently to try to get any ridges or anything out of here. There's a little bit of ridge left. Let me just make a pass or two at it. I don't want to bore you to death with it. But I don't know if you can see the edge of that tool there, but I just want to get a light cut here. Little shavings like that. And come back fairly slow. And hopefully just the high spots. That's not good. And sometimes you'll bail out with that cut a little before you get to the edge, and you'll end up with a little bit of a flare in this direction. It's real easy to let that happen. So I got a little bit of a deeper cut there I like. Try that one more time. I'm getting just a little ridge right there that I'm not sure. I must have just dug in there a little bit more than I thought I did. Yeah, that's clean enough. Anyway, that's the way I do the bottom of it. Then, assuming that I've done the bottom of it that way, and it came off, similar kind of a thing there. I'm going to flip it around, put it in the chuck, and I'm not going to bore you with taking off the rough wood on the top of the wing because it's the same exact thing I just got through doing. That's what I'm looking for. So let's get this thing chucked up here. Well, that gets real sticky in there somewhere, and I'm not sure why. Okay. Grab my chuck here. Okay. I like that knob on there. I always like to tighten it from both sides. Okay, this is what I did yesterday. Yesterday or this morning sometime, I forgot now. And I've already done the flat stuff here, so what we have left is the top of the bowl. This is going to be the top of the bowl now. And just out of habit, I like to go ahead and bring the tailstock up there. Don't really need to that bad, but I don't expect anything's going to happen there. So let's get in here and let's make a bowl. I don't know if you can see here, I've tried to make the bottom of the bowl and the edge of the bowl up here be in line with each other, so it looks like that bowl is going right through the wing. And I got it pretty close. So I'm gonna, now the pith is right here, so I'm gonna want to get rid of that. I'm just gonna leave maybe a 1/4 inch rim sticking up there. So all I gotta do is just hog a bunch of wood away here till I get down there, and then we'll hollow the bowl out. Still staying about the same plane. I've kept it wet enough, I guess. Now you can do all kinds of things with this. If you wanted to have bark up here around the rim of your bowl, in addition to the bark here, you would want to make the top of the bowl be much closer to the top edge of the log. Forget about the pith for now, so that you got some bark right in there where you're working. Then when you're getting in here hollowing, you don't want to be knocking that bark off. So you start cutting it out from the middle. You probably couldn't have this in your way at that point. But I have seen them with bark left around the edge of the little bowl, which is a pretty neat deal. I've just never got to the point of trying that yet. The other thing, I did the one at Fort Worth a few months ago. I thought you could leave a candlestick holder right in the middle of that. You could have a bowl in a bowl, and the inner hole would be just the size of a candle, and you could use this as a candlestick. You can also leave a little step here in your bowl, and you can make a lid for it. And maybe the lid would be something from the same kind of log that would have a lot of bark on it. So there's a lot of variations you can do. I'm just going to make this a simple deal. Go ahead, get this out of the way, I think. I probably shouldn't be collecting all this stuff back here. Not a good habit. I don't want any tattoos in my elbow there either. Okay. Now, basic bowl turning, I guess. Get that a little bit higher. Okay. A little bit of a skate there on me. Get that tool rest a little closer and a little bit lower. Kind of reminds you of Bradford pear, doesn't it? It's cut so easy. Now this is a point where I could decide if I want to put a step there. So if I want to put a lid in it, it's got something to sit on there. So I could come in here and I could just maybe put a little step in there. Something like that. You could round that edge off. You could do anything you want to with it. I've kind of got it rounded a little bit like that. If I was going to reverse chuck it, it would be nicer probably if that was just square. If it just came up square, went across square, and back down in which case I'd take a little more wood off there. So if I was doing this at the house, I'd probably go at that point there, and once I got this all cleaned up and through playing with it. And this one's kind of interesting because it had the limb coming out here, right at the widest part of the log. And I thought, well, maybe I can keep that in there as a feature. It's the first time I've had anything like that, and it worked out pretty good. But everybody knows how to reverse chuck something like that. Get a flat piece of wood, chuck it up, put a groove in it that's got the same diameter and width of that rim there, jam it up against it, bring the tailstock back up, and I still got the center marking on this backside of this tenon here to where that point should land. Bring it up, snug it up there, and then you can work on the backside of this thing and shape it any way you want to. You kind of have to be careful that you don't turn it too far and put an air hole in it somewhere. I use the air on the side of having fairly thick bowls where you can't get to it to measure it. Our hat guy could probably put a light up in there somewhere and see if it's shining through or something, but that'd be kind of hard to do on something that small, wouldn't it? Sneak an LED or something in there. I don't know if that would work or not. But one other thing I wanted to show you. I didn't think I showed this one to you yet. I thought about how would it work if I wanted to have the wing slope down instead of coming across straight, slope towards the tabletop. So I don't know if you can see that or not, but I got some curvature. In there. And then, of course, when you do the top, you'd have to follow that same curve, try to get uniform thickness. So I want to make one like that at some point and see if I can get a little curve to it. To make it more interesting, the log could be longer than I had these logs. I could have 2 or 3 inches on each side, as long as it's not hitting down here, and have something with pretty long wings on it. And you could slope this thing down and maybe even make it a little wavy if you really want to get challenged. Make it kind of a wavy wing and try to track that underside curve with the top side curve. So there's a lot of possibilities with something that's this not simple, but they're kind of fun to do. You can let your imagination go crazy. But anybody have any questions? Turn the wings around. Right here? Never even thought about it. I go with whatever cut I got on the edge of it. Some of them even have the chainsaw. You can tell it was cut with a chainsaw because it's real rough. I kind of like that natural look anyway. So you're talking about coming out here and rounding it out here. Yeah, I guess you could do that. It's still turning on the same axis, right? It would be turning on the same axis. You got a good chance of chipping some wood off, I would think, when you do that. Oh, at the beginning, yeah. Yeah, I just always wanted them to be square. And they could be trapezoidal. If you made your chainsaw or your bandsaw cut at an angle, you could have an angle there. Nothing says it has to be square 90 degrees or round or at an angle. So there's a lot of variations you can do there. One neat thing about this is you can take a random orbital sander and you can sand this because it's flat. And you can, if you got a few little ridges in there, just get your sander out and sand that away. I'd let it dry a few days first. It's going to clog up your sandpaper pretty good. But it will warp, and if you've got the pith in there anywhere, you're likely to get some pretty good cracks. But anyway, any other questions? Surely somebody's got a question. You can also do this with just a square piece of wood. You can make it square, get it squared up first, put it on here, and that's where you probably do want to have some drooping in here. You could have. And that's one of the first ones I ever did was a little bowl that was square, out of walnut, and it just kind of droops down. So there's all kinds of possibilities. I made some, trying to think of the word now, coasters that you put your drink thing on out of some square pieces of maple, and then cut out a recess there for a piece of cork that'll fit in there, and then the 4 tips of the wings come down, and that's what it's resting on the table. And then they get knocked off and hit the floor, and one of the corners chips off, you know. So should have soaked them in thin super glue or something before I put the finish on them, maybe. So anyway, that's kind of a short demo, but there's not a whole lot to it. So, and I've got an extra piece of wood here. I think that's Bradford pear, so y'all can throw that in the drawing or whatever you want to if somebody wants to make one. This is a little smaller than I've been making. They're usually more on this size here, but it's going to take extra time to get all that wood off if I did that, so I didn't want to go with that. So anyway, that's all I got. Hit the start button and make it stop. Cut this thing off.